What if the Holy Scriptures you've studied your whole life were incomplete? Not because they've been adulterated or lost, but because they've been deliberately kept hidden in the remote peaks of Ethiopia, far from any influence of Western society. After completing his journey through the spiritual dimensions and returning to our world, Enoch prepares for his ultimate ascension to the higher planes. But before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Tewahedo Church has preserved something monumental, an ancient Bible composed of 81 books, a collection of sacred texts unaltered through the ages, filled with enigmatic writings, celestial revelations, peculiar prophecies, and chronicles that many maintain have the potential to definitively transform our perception of Jesus. Can people truly foresee the future? Receive messages across ages and dimensions? If so, why were such volumes removed from the Bibles used by the majority of humanity today? What did they present that made them excessively controversial or too powerful? Currently, while Mel Gibson, the filmmaker responsible for The Passion of the Christ, progresses with an anticipated sequel, rumors are beginning to surface. Some speculate that these neglected texts may set the standard for what comes next, bringing ancient and secret concepts into the spotlight of global discussions. The question is no longer whether these documents exist. The real doubt is, what will happen when society finally contemplates what has been excluded? There is no single, exclusive Bible. This is a fact that shocks almost everyone. There is no single, exclusive Bible. There never has been. The Protestant canon holds 66 volumes. The Catholic Bible holds 73. The Eastern Orthodox collection contains some additional volumes. And the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest Christian orders in the world, accepts 81 volumes. Some scholars enumerate them differently, based on how they group the records, but the question remains. The Ethiopian community is far more extensive, and this does not stem from an unknown or insignificant faction. Ethiopian Christianity dates back almost 2 millennia. The Book of Acts 8 recounts the episode of an Ethiopian eunuch, a high official of Candace, sovereign of the Aksumite Empire, who was reading the manuscript of Isaiah when the disciple Philip met him on the road. This account is also present in the New Testament. Ethiopia's connection to the biblical setting is no small detail. It is directly embedded in the text itself. The Aksumite kingdom, located in what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea, established Christianity as its official creed in the 4th century, becoming one of the first states in the world to do so. Around the same time, the writings began to be translated into Ge'ez, a Semitic dialect that continues to serve as the liturgical language of the Ethiopian Church. The document you see here dates back to around 1720. It consists of the Gospels of Matthew and Mark, written in Ge'ez. And when such versions were produced, they included works that other lineages would eventually discard. Works such as 1 Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, sometimes called Little Genesis, which retells passages from Genesis and Exodus with a cherub narrating the story to Moses on Sinai, adding levels of detail about annals, covenants, and the metaphysical struggle behind the human journey. The Ascension of Isaiah, with its remarkable contemplation of 7 celestial strata and a sacred being descending through them all. There are also other manuscripts, such as the Shepherd of Hermas, a text on revelations and ethical precepts widely studied in the early Mediterranean Church, and the volumes of the Ethiopian Maccabees, which have no equivalent in any other Christian collection. Such records did not emerge as a later addition. They were fused into the foundation of Ethiopian Christianity from its earliest centuries. They were not considered alien or profane. They were scripture. They were recited in temples, examined by wise men, and transcribed by religious figures. While the rest of the Christian world restricted its canon, Ethiopia maintained a more extensive one. And due to the geographical confinement of the Ethiopian plateaus, surrounded by deserts, peaks, and imperial political circumstances, these texts endured in a manuscript heritage almost uninterrupted for more than a millennium. The rest of the globe moved forward. Ethiopia remained steady, and what it safeguarded may transform how you understand Christianity itself. Enoch was mentioned. Let us discuss the Book of Enoch, for this is the one that most resonates with people. First Enoch, also known as the Ethiopian Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch, the Ethiopian, as recorded here, superior to Abraham, the Blessed One, and Moses, the inaugural full human subject. Since the only complete preserved translation is in Ge'ez, the writing is attributed to Enoch, who was Noah's great-grandfather. In Genesis, Enoch barely appears. It is only reported that he walked with the Creator and then disappeared, for God captured him. That's all. 7 successions after Adam, and he merely withdraws from the narrative. However, Fun Enoch expands on everything that Genesis keeps silent. It is a vast and impactful prophetic creation. Cherubim who fall, called watchers, descend to the world, mate with human females, and spread forbidden knowledge, metalworking, sorcery, astronomy. Their heirs become the Nephilim, colossal beings who ravage the earth. God retaliates by sending a flood to cleanse the world. But before this happens, Enoch is led on a journey through the universe. He perceives the configuration of the firmament, witnesses the divine verdict, and encounters a figure called the Son of Man. And pause here, for this jargon, Son of Man, is one of the most crucial epithets in the New Testament. It is the vocative that Jesus applies to himself more than any other. Not Son of God, but Son of Man. And when he uses this phrase, he is not conceiving something unprecedented. He is basing himself on an already established heritage, which several experts connect directly to the allegories or metaphors of First Enoch, elaborated around the 1st or 2nd centuries BC. In Enoch, the Son of Man is a perpetual sacred being. He sits on a seat of splendor. He judges the monarchs of the world. He exists before Genesis and is revealed at the close of time. If this seems familiar, it should be. Such descriptions closely match the way Jesus is portrayed in the Gospels and the Book of Revelation. So why is Enoch absent from most Bibles? Early Christians knew him perfectly well. The Epistle of Jude, contained in all Christian Bibles, directly mentions First Enoch. Jude 1:14-15 states, Enoch, the 7th from Adam, prophesied concerning them, and immediately displays a passage that almost replicates what Enoch 1. This is not an uncertain allusion. It is a direct transcription. The early doctors of the Church disagreed on this. Tertullian, writing in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, endorsed the tome and considered it scripture. Others, such as Origen and Augustine, demonstrated more caution. When the Western canon was fixed, Enoch was removed, not because it had been attested as untrue, but because it did not harmonize with the direction the majority doctrine was taking. Then the Dead Sea Scrolls emerged. In 1947, remains of First Enoch were located in the Qumran caves. Remains in Aramaic predating Christ, numerous copies, 11 volumes distributed across various caves. This was not a medieval invention, nor an irrelevant oddity. Enoch was part of the collection of a dedicated Jewish congregation that lived in the centuries immediately preceding Jesus. It was widely read, intensely researched, and contributed to shaping the doctrinal lexicon that the writers of the New Testament would later use. Reflect on the impact of this. A document depicting a divine figure predating creation called the Son of Man, written before the coming of Jesus, located in the same area where John the Baptist prayed. The connections are not conjecture. They are kept in galleries in Jerusalem, inscribed on pieces of leather over 2,000 years old. The Book of Enoch did not become extinct because it was mistaken. It became extinct because whoever had the authority to establish the canon judged that it did not fit. Ethiopia diverged. The imperceptible immersion. If Enoch introduces the universal Christ before the Gospels, the Ascension of Isaiah introduces the universal Christ within the Gospels. The Ascension of Isaiah is a hybrid manuscript, partly Hebrew, partly Christian, possibly consolidated between the 1st and 4th centuries. The initial part describes the torture of the prophet Isaiah, cut in the center inside an empty tree trunk by order of a depraved ruler. Early Christians used to confirm prophetic martyrdom However, it is the later part that becomes exceptional. Isaiah is transported through 7 celestial planes. Each level becomes more resplendent than the last. In the lower planes, the angels are in conflict. There is friction, order, combat. As Isaiah ascends, the brightness grows, the praise becomes profound, and the boundary between the mortal and the sacred becomes ever thinner. And then he observes something that immobilizes him, a revelation of the descent of the beloved, a sacred figure who descends through the 7 heavens, masking himself at each level. He adopts the appearance of angels on each plane so that none of them recognize him. He descends completely to the firmament and then to earth, where he springs from a woman, dwells, suffers, dies, and returns to life. Afterwards, he ascends again through the 7 heavens, this time shown in all his splendor, with each angel bowing in his wake. Consider what this entails doctrinally. This is not merely resurrection as a return to existence. This is resurrection as universal recomposition, a sacred being crossing strata of reality, shedding camouflage and reassuming dominion over all fields of life. It is a much more meticulous, much more allegorical, and much more visually powerful account of Christ's trajectory than any point contained in the common canon. And this carries meanings that transcend theology. If the early Christians, in large numbers, perceived the event of Christ as a universal piece that unfolded across various extensions of reality, then the resurrection was not merely a prodigy set in a garden. It was the culmination of a narrative that began before the genesis of the cosmos and unfolded through every layer of existence. And the empty tomb was merely the fraction that we were able to see. The ascension of Isaiah was read and valued by various early Christians. It appears in quotations made by doctors of the church. Jerome knew of it. Epiphanius quoted it. However, like Enoch, it did not enter the definitive canon, except in Ethiopia. There, it was preserved, reproduced, and recited in temples, considered part of the sacred heritage. And this raises a question that does not have a trivial answer. What kind of Christianity would we have today if those manuscripts had remained? The canon was debated. This is the part that leaves people distressed, not because it's alarming, but because it's real. There wasn't a single moment when someone stood up and declared, "These tomes are accepted, those are not." The constitution of the canon was a long, intricate, and politically intertwined process that lasted for ages. Early Christians did not possess a New Testament. They possessed the Hebrew Scriptures, which Christians would later call the Old Testament, and they possessed epistles from the disciples and chronicles about Jesus that circulated in various cells. Different churches used different manuscripts. The church in Rome read certain letters. The church in Alexandria read others. The church in Ethiopia read still more. In the 2nd century, the pressure to standardize increased. Groups considered deviant, such as Gnosticism and Marcionism, were forming their own canons, and church leaders felt the urgency to establish a legitimate canon. Marcion specifically hastened this controversy. He entirely disregarded the Old Testament and accepted merely an altered edition of the Gospel of Luke and 10 of Paul's epistles. The mainstream church needed to fight back. If those considered dissidents were compiling canons, orthodoxy also lacked one. And Athanasius, prelate of Alexandria, wrote a correspondence in 367 AD listing 27 volumes of the New Testament, the exact 27 volumes that appear in all current New Testaments. His correspondence is frequently cited as a key point in the shaping of the canon, but Athanasius did not have the power to apply his list everywhere. It took decades of debate, local synods, Hippo in 393, Carthage in 397, and a slow process of building institutional agreement before the canon we recognize today took on its common form. And even then, it was not universal. The Syrian church preserved a distinct canon for ages. The Ethiopian church preserved its most extensive collection. The Armenian heritage also exhibited variations. The point is not that the canon was conceived with bad intentions. Several of the individuals involved were reliable and analytical thinkers, attempting to preserve what they believed to be guided by the sacred. However, the process was also influenced by politics, geography, language, and dominion. Manuscripts in Greek had a greater chance of being absorbed than manuscripts in Aramaic or Ge'ez. Manuscripts endorsed by the Church of Rome held more institutional weight than manuscripts endorsed by the Church of Axum. Manuscripts that harmonized with the nascent orthodoxy survived. Manuscripts that challenged it were set aside. And the standards were not always strictly theological. Apostolic ancestry was relevant. Was it feasible to associate the text with a disciple or someone from his group? Widespread use was relevant. Was the manuscript read in churches of various denominations? Doctrinal consistency was relevant. Did the manuscript harmonize with what was becoming established as the mainstream faith? These were acceptable standards, but they inevitably reflected the urgencies of the congregations with the greatest prestige. Researchers such as Bart Ehrman, Elaine Pagels, and others have written extensively on this process. Bruce Metzger's exemplary work on the canon tracks these conflicts and choices with a remarkable degree of detail. It's not a secret. It's not a plot. It's merely the way the story unfolds. Choices are made. Some voices are praised. Others are silenced. And with time, the silenced voices are forgotten, unless someone, somewhere, keeps them alive. Long before Rome made its choices, in the highlands of the Tigray region, in northern Ethiopia, monasteries settled on the slopes as if they had been placed there by something beyond human power. Debre Damo, Abuna Yamata Gu. These are spaces you reach by climbing a rope up a straight rock face, or by trekking along a thin ledge with nothing but emptiness below. They were built this way by design. Confinement was the goal. Debre Damo sits on a smooth-topped ridge reachable only by climbing a wall of about 15 meters with a hide rope. It was established in the 6th century by Abuna Aragawi, one of the 9 saints, a group of preachers recognized for spreading Christianity deeply in the Ethiopian highlands. For more than 1,500 years, religious people have lived on that mountain. They produce their own sustenance, they pray, and they reproduce documents manually in Ge'ez, on parchment made from goatskin, in the same way it was done a millennium ago. And this confinement has become the largest scheme for preserving the chronicle of Christianity. While collections were being liquidated in Alexandria, while manuscripts were being lost in doctrinal clashes in the Roman Empire, while eras of battles and alterations erased documents across Europe and the Near East, Ethiopian monks continued to reproduce lineage after lineage, passing on not only terms but methods, not only theology but the very physical process of converting animal hide into sacred manuscripts. Throughout Ethiopia, it is estimated that there are nearly 350,000 Christian documents distributed among approximately 20,000 churches and 8,000 monasteries. Numerous documents have never been fully catalogued. Some have never even been depicted. The Gunda Monastery alone, in eastern Tigray, contains over 220 volumes, almost all originating from before the 16th century, one of the largest collections of this type in the entire territory. Garama Gospels, kept in the Abba Garama Monastery near Adwa. For a long time, the Garama Gospels were thought to be from the Middle Ages, perhaps around 900 years old. However, in the early 2000s, carbon dating analyses carried out at Oxford University impacted the intellectual field. Garima II, the older of the 2 volumes, was dated approximately between 390 and 570 AD. This possibly makes it the oldest fully illustrated Christian document still existing on the globe, even older than the renowned Rabula Gospels from Syria, dated to 586. Its pages display vibrant paintings of the evangelists, ornate canon tables, geometric diagrams, and a depiction of Solomon's temple unparalleled in Christian aesthetics. And these pages have endured not because they were kept in climate-controlled vaults. They endured because monks covered them in cloth, placed them on stone shelves, and touched them with their own hands for over 500 years. The dye is original, the shades are original, even the stitching is original. But this chronicle of preservation is not merely something of the past, it remains painfully present. In November 2020, the fight began in the Tigray region. Ethiopian federal groups and Eritrean militias marched across the highlands. Debre Damo, that 6th century convent atop a nearly inaccessible cliff, was bombarded by cannon fire in January 2021. Eritrean warriors climbed to the point and looted it. At the Waldabar convent in western Tigray, monks and nuns reported that invading troops stole over 3,000 leather documents and more than 300 ancient crucifixes made of gold and silver. Looted documents began appearing on eBay, offered for several $100s each. A report from the Orthodox Church Diocese of Tigray verified that 326 members of the clergy were eliminated in just the first 3 months of the conflict. At least 40 churches and convents suffered proven damage, with hundreds of others likely affected. The whereabouts of the Garima Gospels remained uncertain for months during the fighting. Consider this: 15 centuries of uninterrupted preservation, withstanding attacks in the 16th century, Italian colonial incursions, food shortages and coups, and then, in a matter of weeks, unique manuscripts vanished in the fog of a contemporary battle. The Ethiopian heritage of documents is grand in its scale. Tens of thousands of manuscripts still endure throughout the country, protected in convents, temples, and private reserves. Every few years, a new find attracts the spotlight: a previously ignored text, an ancient form, a manuscript that alters the order of Christian literary chronicles. In recent decades, international schemes managed by experts from the University of Hamburg, the British Library, and the Hill Museum have been in place. And the Manuscript Library in Minnesota has been racing to scan as many documents as possible before they are lost to time, conflict, or neglect. 95% of Ethiopia's manuscripts remain in the possession of churches and monasteries, not in galleries. This is not merely the preservation of skins, it is the preservation of a worldview. The Ethiopian church did not merely hold on to the material documents, it continued to read them, to preach based on them, to dwell within the theology contained in Enoch, Jubilees, and the Ascension of Isaiah. For them, these are not lost tomes. They were never lost. The rest of the world merely stopped searching. The monks did not merely protect volumes, they protected an edition of Christianity that the rest of the world had forgotten was viable. And even now, after the fighting, after the pillaging, after a level of ruin that would have ended lesser lineages, they are still there, still reproducing, still praying, still moving pages that the greater part of the world never consulted. The resurgence of Mel Gibson. In 2004, Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ grossed over $600 million in global sales. It was powerful, it was passionate, it was controversial, and it proved that there was a huge market for a film adaptation of the Jesus story that didn't soften the tone. For years, Gibson had talked about making a sequel, one that would examine the resurgence. But this wouldn't be merely a rehash. In dialogues, Gibson shared his longing to go far beyond the empty tomb. He commented on showing the experience of what happened between the suffering and the resurrection, analyzing the descent, the realms beyond the tangible. If this speech seems familiar, then you were paying attention. The concept of Jesus descending through fields, facing forces, crossing strata of the universe. This is not part of the common narrative of the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John depict the empty tomb and the visions after the resurrection. They do not depict the crossing, but Isaiah's ascension does. The heritages preserved in the Ethiopian church do. The broader picture of the universal theology of early Christianity also does. Gibson is Catholic. He is strongly grounded in heritage, regardless of whether or not he directly used texts like 1 Enoch or the Ascension of Isaiah. The theological concepts behind these manuscripts resonated in Christian thought for ages. In the Apostles' Creed, he went down into hell. In medieval prophetic writing, in Dante, in Milton, such concepts never completely disappeared. They were merely pushed into obscurity. A film about the resurrection, directed by Gibson and seriously considering the legacy of the universal descent through multiple fields, could achieve something remarkable. It could present millions of followers with a more untamed, visually impactful, and theologically audacious version of Christ's journey than anything mainstream cinema has ever dared to attempt. It could show the public that the narrative they believe they know possesses scales they have never experienced. Simply reflect on the visual power. 7 heavens, each unique, each rising in glory and reverence. Cherubim that do not resemble romantic figures. They resemble the entities described in Ezekiel and Revelation. Gears within gears, eyes covering the entire crust. Voices that make the foundations of reality vibrate. A Christ-like figure traversing these fields, not as an inert spirit, but as a triumphant sovereign, reclaiming land, breaking free from chains, descending into the most intense silence before rising through each level of Genesis. This would not merely be a sacred film. It would be a visual event, and the social shock could be immense. The Passion of the Christ did not merely raise funds, it transformed the way people openly discussed belief. It stimulated dialogues in temples, study rooms, and homes that persisted for years. A work on the resurgence that draws on the universal heritage of early Christianity could accomplish the same effect, but on an even greater scale. It could prompt people to ask questions they never thought to ask, questions about what was removed from the Bible, about who made those choices, about what else might be waiting in the manuscript heritage of churches they have never heard of. And it could lead many people to search engines typing terms like Book of Enoch, 7 Heavens, and Ethiopian Bible, which is perhaps precisely what this chronicle lacks. We like to affirm to ourselves that nothing is hidden anymore, that every document has already been scanned, every enigma has already been launched onto the network, every confidential piece of data has already been converted into locatable writing. And yet, the most powerful certainties are often precisely those we never considered seeking. In the Ethiopian highlands, within the heritage of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, such leaves still endure, not as vestiges, but as active writing, preserved through capture, confinement, and eras of uncertainty. If a contemporary director returns to this ancient origin, if the upcoming film dares to display the hidden plane between death and resurgence, it will not be merely cinema. It will be a link between a forgotten theology and a global audience that never realized it was missing something. So the real question isn't whether these tomes have endured. They have endured. The question is this: when the rest of the globe finally looks up and contemplates what has always been there, will we identify it as a lost chronicle or as something we should never have forgotten?